Richard Llewellyn wrote how green was my valley. He may have been standing where I am standing now, on a hillside overlooking the valley town of Ebbw Vale in South Wales. Then he saw a once wooded valley denuded of its mighty oaks and beech. In their place he looked down on a landscape desecrated in the aftermath of the Industrial Revolution. Man-made mountains of black slag were the visible evidence of the dross of coal mining, and the mountain air was polluted with the stench of steel production. Men sweated at the coal face and at the furnaces for a pittance, and many gave their lives to satisfy the industry's insatiable appetite. Now the pits are gone. Steel production went with them, and the Vale of Ebbw is green again, and the people live in the sun and breathe the clean air. Well, I've had the good fortune to meet Keith Thomas, who is the local historian, and I believe also you were, Keith, the chief engineer with the local authority, weren't you?
That's right.
And I understand that you've been here for 200 years. Well, at least, not you personally, your family.
Yes, the family has been in the area for 200 years.
What was the area like originally?
Well, it was farmland. Obviously, the hillsides are very steep, and therefore sheep farming. In the base of the valleys, they grew a variety of crops for their own use.
No village?
No village, no.
Farms dotted around the hillside and down in the valley floor, I suppose.
That's right. There were outcrops of iron in the sides of the hills, and there are reports of small iron forges, even in Victoria, in this area where the Garden Festival is.
Oh, this was called Victoria?
Yes.
Why was that?
Well, in 1837, when Queen Victoria was 18, on her 18th birthday, the Monmouthshire Iron Company laid the foundation stones for the Victoria Ironworks. But, of course, within a 12 months, by the time they came to set fire to the first furnace, to blow it in, she had become queen.
Oh,
so then the big blast engine house was named the Royal Victoria.
So first of all, it was agriculture, as one would expect. Then came the iron. The iron led to coal, I presume. They found coal because of iron. How did it work?
That's right. Well, the iron and the coal seams are sandwiched. There are something like 14 seams alternating with ironstone and coal. We get 64 inches of rain a year in this area, so there was plenty of water. That made the whole thing a viable concern to make iron.
Yeah. Then finally came steel.
Yes, in the 1860s, iron could be made into all sorts of qualities, but they experimented and found a way of making steel. It was something newfangled, and that ensured the future stability of the area for 100 years. Except for the period of depression, 1922, the depression really started, and the works closed in 1929 for steel and iron making. Then it was in 1936 that the new Richard Thomas works came here and set in motion another lease of life for the community in employment.
And then that came to an end again. When was that?
Well, the late 60s saw the turn of the tide in the iron and steel making business nationally. It was decided to close down the iron and steel making and make Ebbw Vale a finishings division, coatings division, tin plate and galvanizing. The employment figures, of course, it had got down to 9,000 and it went down then to 3,000. It's now down to about 1,700.
1,700. Going back not all that long, and I remember driving up this valley, and as I approached Ebbw Vale, my one idea was to get out the other side as quickly as possible. It was not pleasant, was it?
Oh, no, no. There was something up to 13,000 men employed here. 3 shifts, 7 days a week. Tremendous industry. Wine Lloyd, the area in which the Garden Festival is, was the dirtiest village in the country.
Was it?
We had gauges measuring the amount of dust falling. At night, the works glowed. There were open gaps, and the light from the steel sheet and the coils and the slabs came out through the sides. You had all the smoke. There were coolers innumerable coolers through the works. The water which is used in the works was used 4 times before it was discharged at the end of the works. The river was yellow, brown, you name it, every colour bar white. There were no fish living in the river, which is of course different today. There are fish all the way up the valley. You had sulphurous fumes from the various chemical processes. The pickling line in the works, a filthy job. Acid sprayed onto the hot steel. So you had all those smells coming. Of course, that air just permeated right through the houses. I went to chapel at Garden City, just here above the festival site. They would discharge coke out of the coke ovens, and they would spray that with water, and you couldn't see across the road from the chapel front. Hundreds and hundreds of tons of coke made right on the side of the road, and there were houses in between the coke ovens and the chapel.
And what about the men who were down in the bowels of the earth getting this black gold we call coal out? I mean, they were suffering as well, weren't they?
Oh yes. In the colliers, in the winter months, they worked 12 hours a day, and they didn't see daylight for the whole of the winter months except on a Sunday, when they had a day off. And in the works themselves, they didn't wear masks to reduce the amount of pollution. They walked around. They didn't wear hard hats like we've got today. There were terrible accidents where slag was tipped and men had scars on themselves from the splashed slag. In the works itself, the steel sheets were going through the mill in excess of 30 miles an hour. 1/8 of an inch steel sheet, red hot, and conveyor where it went along. It would give big, huge loops flying up and down in the mill. The whole sort of atmosphere there was one of danger. I was fortunate I worked for the council, so I had fresh air, and I thought sometimes that the streets were noisy until I went into the works, and you'd go in there and it was absolutely like Dante's Inferno, like hell itself.
Valley of the Ebbw, the steelworks is dead and buried. Now the garden festival has come to put flowers on the grave.
Among her many talents, including spiritual healing, Keith's wife Irene writes poetry.
The poem is called Floral Tribute. Fever over, there is no rolling or turning of sheets. The body of the works is shut down, screwed up, buried at Victoria in a cloud of clinker between Manmoyle and Mynydd Carnacefn. Ashes scattered without breath to catch or carry them away to muck winding sheets flapping in back gardens where women waged war against coal and coolers when plant and houses were in each other's pocket. Slurry, soda and boiler ash stain the valley under the forked out crust of the old furnace wall. In Wynloyd, remains of broken skulls knocked out from drams spatter slag tips where loco latches chained to wagons tipped over shoulders of fire, and men thin and black as spent matches keeled over. Slag has hardened into faces. Iron masters stare across the valley, hollow-eyed, open mouths keeping secrets. Sculpted by molten metal, rivulets of scalding tears run down their wrinkled skin. Red faces in the fire, memorials on the mountain. And then the cry in Argus and Echo and Gwent Gazette. News of a garden festival, read all about it. Obituaries take second place, the interest is in flowers. They will mask the grave in a plot to recover Victoria and bring back colour with...
This year the valley's renaissance will reach its climax. The National Garden Festival, the first in Wales, and possibly the last in Britain, will open its gates to the public on the 1st of May. At least 2 million visitors are expected to descend on Ebbw Vale between May and October when the festival ends. What will they see? Well, the man who can answer all my questions about the Garden Festival is Geoff Cripps. Now you, Geoff, you are the Community Liaison Officer.
That's correct, Clay. I'm the man who's responsible for getting the energy of the local people and their regard for the festival to materialise in the festival itself in terms of events and how we use the local talent, and also to build on the wealth of goodwill that existed from the time that Ebbw Vale came into the running as being the location.
When was that, if I could just cut in?
Around about 86, that's when they were putting the bid in. It had been decided that the last Garden Festival in Britain would be held in Wales, and there was a race on between the cities of Cardiff, Swansea and the Shot and Deeside area, and here in Ebbw Vale.
One of the things that is very obvious to me as someone who has attended the 4 previous festivals, Liverpool, Stoke, Glasgow and Gateshead, is that here at Ebbw Vale you have an obvious advantage, haven't you?
We need oxygen masks. This is what you're referring to, alluding to. We have here at Ebbw Vale, the first Garden Festival is not situated in a city, and the first is not on a flat site, because we embrace not only the valley sides but the mountain side as well. Yeah. And our height ranges from 750 feet above sea level to nearly 1,300 feet on Mynydd Man Moel behind us.
Isn't that a frightening prospect for elderly people who are going to come here? They say, how on earth am I going to cope with those walks?
We have thought about that, and our policy has been accessible to all, dangerous to none. GWR, can I tell you? Griff's Wonderful Road Trains. Not the GWR that some people may be imagining. They will take the public around our 142-acre site, and each of the land trains actually has one carriage adapted to meet the needs of the elderly or disabled and infirm. And so we anticipate that there will be parts of the site that they won't be able to get to, but we reckon 90% they will be able to get to.
On the other hand, if they want to walk, they
can walk.
The facility to even walk up into the mountains, as it were, and look down on the festival in the valley below.
Yes, the one means of getting to very near the top of the site is by funicular railway, a mountain railway, similar to the one that some listeners may have visited at the Great Orme Planted know. So we are the first funicular railway erected in Wales since that 90 years previous, and that will take them very near to the top of the mountain, where for the fit and able and the willing, there are pathways established to get them to the head in the clouds viewpoint. Marvelous. And I jest not, because it is a bit up in the clouds on certain days.
It seems to be a massive site. What sort of acreage do we have?
142 acres, 142. Clay, but 1.5 miles, we're talking north to south. We lie in the valley of the Ebbw Vale, below Ebbw Vale itself, and down to Cwm, the former mining village. Alongside the other side of the mountain, we're looking across now and seeing the typical hillside terraces of a Welsh mining valley, looking at Waun Lloyd across there.
Imagine a family, they've driven from, I don't know where, they've come in, they've parked the car, they're in the festival. They have 2 children as well. Is there something for everyone?
Well, very much a family event we have constructed here, Clay. It's gardens and much more. We're talking about 80 sorts of theme gardens. But here there will be things for all the family to see, to do and enjoy as a family. Some people said, will you have creches with children? Well, really, we don't want to separate the children from the adults. We want them to enjoy things together. Right. Overall, this site we split into 3 distinct themes, referring to the past, present and future. So we've given them titles. The past is called Land of Our Fathers, and in that area they'll get a flavour of Welsh history. For example, we'll find the Gwent and Blaen y Gwent Tree of Time exhibit, which takes the visitor on a journey through time of this particular part of the county of Gwent and propelling a little bit forward into the future and the hopes for the future. In that area too, the city of Cardiff, for example, have their theme garden, and they're going to look at Welsh myths and legends and reflect that in their garden display. As they walk down the main boulevard into the next area Wales celebrates, which is the present, they'll pass an artefacts garden, and in that a number of things we found on site during excavations have been unearthed and placed in position there, so people see mining wheels, mining shaft wheels, etc.
So, besides the floral fantasy, there's all this going on as well.
And entertainment to overlay on top of that again.
That's what I was coming to.
And it's something that's happened in British Garden Festivals, that events have increasingly become important as a mechanism whereby we encourage repeat visits. So that some people will say, well, come on a certain day, and you may just wish to stay in our Rainbow Theatre and enjoy the musical excellence of Wales put on for you that day. That will be inclusive in your ticket price. For the family, we'll go back back to them, there will be exciting rides. We are standing on the side of the mountain here. If we look back north, just about there, I can imagine in my mind's eye, coming out, swinging out over the bluffs, as we call them, a thing called a sky shuttle. This is a major ride. This will take the visitor on a 50-metre arm out over the valley of the Ebbw Vale and rotate them a full 360 degrees before bringing them, if not their breakfast or lunch, back to Earth and allowing them to continue on their visit through the site.
Wait a minute, talking about breakfast and lunch,
Of course we'll have food of all
I was going to say, do these people have to bring their sandwiches and thermos flasks?
They can, but they can eat and eat in many different styles. I know you're going to visit our farm. Well, at the farm they'll be able to get Welsh farmers' teas. They'll be able to eat international style, all sorts of different foods.
You and I, Geoff, are standing here now with our hard hats on and looking down the valley. We can almost hear bulldozers, JCBs at work, men with picks and shovels.
There's a lot to be done before Friday, May the 1st.
Is it going to be ready, I ask?
I say with every assurance possible in my bones, yes.
I've met the festival's green man. At least that's what I'm going to call you, Peter Gough, because you're responsible for buying, not the planting, but buying all the plants that the visitors will see on the festival site. And that must have been, and is, a fantastic undertaking.
More of a sort of logistical nightmare. I mean, we're talking about more than 1 million plants. There's something like 330,000 trees and shrubs, 550,000 perennials, bedding plants, wildflowers, and then there's something like 150,000 bulbs. So it's a lot to keep track of.
And obviously you can't just walk into a garden centre and say, look, I want 1,000 plants, please. They just haven't got that quantity.
We're trying to push landscape architects to give us schedules in advance. We've been growing speculatively. We've been preparing the nurseries to grow on plants for us so that we don't lose a year's growing time here. We've been growing small trees in containers, though we haven't got the areas ready for planting. They've been grown in nurseries and then they've been delivered to us for the next planting season without that year's sort of loss of growth and planted into the ground. So, we've got to keep sort of thinking ahead all the time.
All these plants, these thousands of plants, are you getting them all from Britain?
The vast majority are coming from Britain, but we had to look further afield for some of the less common, larger trees. And those are only available on the continent where they grow sort of large stands, hundreds plus of trees that are 4 or 5 metres high with a stem circumference of sort of 25, 30 centimetres.
So what countries have you been searching?
It's meant travelling as far afield as Italy, Germany, Holland and France.
What do you get from Italy, for example? Why go that far?
Well, unfortunately, we're the last in a series of 5 garden festivals, plus a lot of projects, Euro Disney, etc., requiring a lot of semi-mature trees, so we've had to travel further and further afield, and even though it's been sort of multi-stem birch, quite a sort of common plant, to get them at the size we required, we've had to go to Italy.
You've got an avenue somewhere of very mature trees, haven't you?
Yes, they're our largest trees on site. Dawn redwoods, we've got 16 of them. They're something like 15 metres tall, and they came from a street in Holland where they were thinning out the trees.
Thinning out trees?
Sounds incredible, but these trees are 15 metres high. They put twice as many in to get the effect, and now they're having to take some out.
But how do you transplant a tree that size?
With great difficulty, really.
Sure.
We're fortunate in that the Dawn redwood transplants quite readily at semi-mature size, but they've had to dig round the roots. They've had to drill a hole through the trunk. They've inserted a steel bar and then brought in a big crane with some steel hawsers, and they've attached those to either sides of the bar and lifted them vertically onto the back of a truck, and these are then being sent over 2 at a time, put on a ferry and delivered to us direct.
And were they a problem to plant?
The trees themselves weigh about sort of 6 or 7 tons with their root balls. So, I mean, while you're lifting them, you're risking the tree literally exploding open with the weight of its own root ball and splintering into pieces. Fortunately, at this end, we were able to lift them straight into the position that they were going to grow in, which had been specially prepared for them. And as you can see, we've now got 16 trees there that have been there for 2 years and doing very well.
So, what's the soil like on site?
It's literally been a horticultural nightmare from the very start. We're working with a site that largely is composed of colliery shale, very sterile and inert material. We've had to incorporate a lot of organic matter in that to improve its water holding.
What were you using as organic matter?
Mainly spent mushroom compost, which is a waste product from mushroom farms. I mean, we have sort of an environmental awareness policy, and we've been using this in sort of large quantities. It's also proved very useful in that it does supply some nitrogen, which the colliery shale does lack.
Festival opens 1st of May. What will the very first visitors see in the way of colour?
Being Wales, we're very much going to be into daffodils. I mean, it presents a problem in that we're opening at the beginning of May, the end of the daffodil season, so we're having to hold them back. They're being stored in cold stores for a few months and then brought out and grown on.
From the very first opening day until it closes sometime in October, people will be expecting and must see a good display of colour. Now, isn't that going to be a problem to maintain a carpet of colour all through that period?
We're committed to providing people with a riot of colour. I mean, we have the rainbow bedding display, which is a series of 3 rainbows in the rainbow colours. It's on the bank down there. It's something like sort of 40 metres across and sort of 30 metres high. And we're having up to, I think it's about 100,000 pansies grown on for spring bedding display. We've even got having white pansies grown on for clouds. And this will then be changed in June for a summer display. It'll be tremendous.
The conclusion I come to, Peter, is that the ordinary gardener thinks he's got problems. Compared with yours, his life is a very easy one. Spoken to Peter Gough, who's responsible for buying in the plants in very large numbers. I'm now with Heather Marshall. Heather, you are the assistant manager in charge of horticulture for the management contractor Bovis.
That's right. I've got 2 main roles. One is to supervise all the landscape contracts, and the other one is that we've been setting up a maintenance team for over 2 years now, so that there's a set-up team ready to take over when the festival opens.
What have you been planting, bulbs or...?
Absolutely everything from semi-mature trees, which range from the metasequoias we have, which are 40 feet tall, down to bulbs, herbaceous, heathers, shrubs.
And have you had the weather which has suited you?
We've had a real variety of weathers. The summer of 89 and 90 were both very hot and dry, and we had problems getting enough water onto the site. At that time we were using bowsers. We used to have about 6 water tankers running about the site. The winters have been reasonably kind to us. We do have problems with too much water though. The ground gets very soggy when it's wet. We've had to stop planting on occasions. This winter, frost has been the main problem. We were planting about 150,000 bulbs, daffodils and tulips, and the ground became so frozen that even picks and crowbars weren't getting in. So we hired some propane gas blowers and a core drill in order to thaw out the ground and sort of drill cores out in order to get the bulbs in. So I think this amused quite a lot of people.
There's always
it got the job done though, that was the main thing.
There's always a way, isn't there?
There is, yes.
There's always a way.
Yeah.
So after the planting, obviously the big job is maintaining the stuff looking good.
It won't be a problem. It'll be a lot of hard work. We've got some quite unusual features to maintain. We have a grass maze which has banks which are at 45 degrees, and there's paths along these banks for people to walk on top of. That's the sort of thing we can't maintain during opening hours. It all has to be done with a fly mow, with a special rope and cable extension kit, which is very hard work for somebody. They'll end up with big calluses on their hands, and it involves a lot of intricate edging up of the edges. We'll have about 80 staff during the festival, and they will be working shifts so that a certain amount of work is done out with hours, and the rest of the work done during hours. 7 days a week this will be, so it takes a lot of dedicated staff.
Yes, it does. Those staff, will they be able to work when the visitors are moving about the site?
Yes, there are certain jobs they won't be able to do. If there's a busy picnic area, they obviously can't cut the grass during opening hours. If it's a quiet day, then yes, they could. But I think the public will enjoy seeing the gardeners actually about, because if they don't see them, they'll wonder how this place is kept neat and tidy. In this area, where there hasn't been a lot of horticulture previously, the main industries have been coal mining and steelworks, and that's where a lot of our labour force has actually come from. They've been employment trainees with us, and we've managed to get a lot of them back into full-time employment, and they're thoroughly enjoying being involved in gardening.
So even if they were steel workers or miners, they probably did some gardening at home, so it's not totally new to them.
No, some of them have been very interested in allotments. One of our chaps has won the prize for best allotment in the borough, so we've got some real green-fingered people here.
Good, good. High on the hillside overlooking the festival site, and indeed now part of it, is Troyd Clough Farm. And this is the home of Wyndham Morris and his family. Wyndham, how long have you farmed here?
About 1950, my father took the farm, having to move out of the way of the industrial tip-in.
But he was a farmer?
He was a full-time farmer. Before he came here, he farmed Pencreag, straight across the valley here.
So why did he have to move? What happened?
Well, the tip-in area here got filled up, and they decided to transfer the tip-in into the valley, which was right in front of the farmhouse.
Now, that's coal tipping, is it?
No, slag from the furnaces. You could not see that mountain behind those tips when they finished from here. The tip was spreading out all the time, and the further it was going out, the nearer the farm, and they couldn't do much about it. So he was fortunate. This farm became vacant with a coal board, and they offered him this farm here.
How many acres do you have here with us?
41.
41?
Yeah. But I mean, out after the 41, you can see it's only about 11 acres of good ground. The rest is all rough running out here.
Yeah.
You couldn't make a living on a farm like this. I mean, the big farms not making livings today, I think.
That's true.
I keep 30-odd sheep here now, and we breed Welsh cobs.
I understand also, Wyndham, that you're one of quite a large family.
1 of 19, 14 alive now.
14 still
14
alive?
still alive, all on a pension.
I'm trying to imagine life, father, mother, 19 children in a small farmhouse.
Yeah.
How did you manage to sleep, for instance?
Well, the tie us in bed, see, they wouldn't a rope. Die about 6 in the bed. No. The old farm up at Pencreag was a fair size. There was 4 big bedrooms, so you could spread them out there.
You remember Ebbw Vale as it was?
Yes. There's been big changes in Ebbw Vale, mind you.
Are they good changes, Wyndham?
Oh, changes for the better, I think. When we came here, 1929, the old steelworks, Ebbw Vale Steel Line and Coal Works was here. That's who put biggest part of the rubbish here. And I seen the old works go down and a new one built. And I've seen that one go down now. And a garden festival built on the site.
Yes, well, it must have been a bit of a shock to you when somebody came along and said, now look, you know, we're going to have a huge national garden festival on your doorstep.
Yeah.
What was your reaction to that?
Well, I was delighted with it.
Were you?
I was in full agreement with all of that. I mean, when I offered the farm, I thought, well, there's opportunity now to clean the area up and put it back as it originally was. Because this farm on old maps, it was one of the biggest farms in the valley here. And all down here, I've seen the map of it. It's all lovely woodland area right down to the river.
Was it really?
On a nice gradient now.
Oh.
But to think of that had been tipped on and buried for never be seen again.
Yeah, this is the tragedy.
Yeah. But to see the garden festival come now and put a top on it, like, is a big bonus, I think, for the area.
Yep, it is. You're glad of that.
Glad of it, yeah.
Now, you are part of it, aren't you?
Yeah.
But aren't you going to get fed up with people coming here all the time and so on?
No. One time, before they put that plant there, people used to walk through here. Always somebody coming past to have a talk to. But when they closed that, I had to walk over Wineloy to the Park Hotel to have a talk to somebody to get any local gossip, like. So it's going to be enjoyable, I think, anyway.
And then after the festival, what happens? You'll stay here?
Oh, we stay in here, yes. The farm comes back to us after the festival.
Look. I see.
Yeah, but we have given them a free hand now to do what they want to do. It don't be no bother at all, like.
Can I just ask one more question, if I may? You followed your father into farming.
Yeah.
Have you any sons?
I got the son is here now, look.
Just one?
One son and a daughter.
You weren't as prolific as your father?
No. Well, I mean, there was no television about them days, was there?
No, I didn't. Graham Rowlands, Education Liaison Officer for the festival.
That's right.
Aren't you, local lad, made good?
It's nicely put, Clay. I am a local lad. I was born in Cwm, lived the first number of years in Cwm itself before moving over to Nantyglo, where I spent the formative years and the years before I went into industry, before I went into education. So yes, I know the area very, very well indeed, and it's an area which I'm particularly proud.
When you said you went into education, what does that mean?
A tradition, I think, in the area of Nantyglo was that when you left school, Ebbw Vale Steelworks was the mecca as far as jobs and future was concerned. Of course, with the demise of Ebbw Vale Steelworks, then a lot of people moved down the valley, including my own family. And so the natural progression for me after leaving school was going to Llanwern Steelworks, where I worked for the first 4 years before deciding to become a teacher.
Education Liaison Officer, who are you educating now then?
My brief is to bring 100,000 school children to the Garden Festival during the 5 months from May the 1st to the 4th of October. The Garden Festival company were quick to recognise the fact that what we were doing was making history, and therefore we wanted to share that making of history with the young people, not just in Wales, but all age ranges in all counties in England and Wales. And I say England and Wales, that's not quite the picture, because we've had school children here from Chernobyl in Russia. Yes, indeed. We've had school children here from Osaka in Japan, Sweden, France, Germany, Italy. 20,000 school children have been here, and they've come to see the remarkable changes that we've achieved in a very short time to the environment.
Yes, but how can they see the changes if they're only here for a day? How can they see the past? How can you project the future for them?
We've looked into the archives of industry, tapped into iron, coal and steel, and captured through that photographs, artifacts of the past, and of course people's memories. We can trace from 1790 with the first ironworks in Rasa. We can trace that through to 1938, biggest integrated iron and steel works in the whole of Europe. Ebbw Vale in its heyday, with iron, coal and steel, to the days when the heavy industry was closed, And all that we are left with in this valley now is the tin plate and galvanizing works in Ebbw Vale itself. I always start by talking about what was here, and I preface it by asking, do they know the meaning of two words, environment and pollution? And without exception, there is always a nucleus in each age range who know the true meaning. And therefore you build on showing the past, the ugliness that was achieved here, not because people didn't care, but people didn't understand what they were doing. All that was left behind was ecological problems, social and economic. What Garden Festival Wales has done in the 3 years of the building is created a landscape which is one of real beauty. It shows that when man and the environment work in harmony, that's a bit of a cliche, I know, but when it happens, then this earth will be a better place for everyone. People's preconceived ideas of what a Welsh valley is no longer true. We're not coal tips, shale tips and sheep. There's more to us than that. Come and see us.
What about the future of this site? I mean, it closes in October, possibly, hopefully 2 million people will have come through, adults as well. After they've all gone, what's left?
Well, you're talking about a 5-month fun event.
Yes.
It's not just Garden Festival Ebbw Vale. What we are doing is a Welsh national event. And so therefore I believe everybody in Wales should be proud of what we're doing. And when I give talks to young people, particularly in the valleys in Wales, they ask me the question, the same as you know, what future is there? And I would say our site is one which everyone will be looking at. And I'm hoping that what we will achieve here is the landscape, beauty, light industry, jobs for young people, research facilities here, housing, affordable for people, and of course leisure as well. We're looking towards 90 acres of the 142 acres remaining as some form of tourist and leisure attraction. I went to Gough Primary School in Antiglo, and we moved out down the valley. We went to see the castle perhaps in Chepstow or Ragland, or went down to Caerleon for our input of Roman times. What we're doing now is that we are having the young people from Chepstow, Caerleon, coming up the Welsh valleys to look at what we are doing here. And if that interest was maintained and multiplied into their parents, then we are saying that we've really created a future for this part of Wales.
Clay Jones has been looking ahead to Garden Festival Wales. The producer from Bristol was Anthony Smith.